Welcome to Books in the World. My name is Richard Bodertha, and I'll be your host today. This program is in collaboration with the Cape Cod Writers Center. Our guest today is Ed Meek of Somerville and Wellfleet, who has written a book of short stories called Luck, which was published in 2017. Good afternoon, Ed.
Good afternoon, Richard.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Ed, you're a poet as well as a fiction writer and nonfiction writer. Today we're here to discuss your book of short stories called Luck. And what sort of time period were these stories written?
They were written over maybe 15 years or so.
Yeah.
And they take place anywhere from the late 70s right up through 2010 or so.
Late 70s through 2010. Now, what got you started being a writer? What pulled you into that vocation slash avocation?
I had some encouragement when I was in high school from a ninth grade teacher, Mrs. O'Connell. I worked on a literary magazine in high school.
Oh, you did? Yeah. Where'd you go to high school?
I went to Milton High.
Oh, okay. You have a story in here called The Most Boring Town in the World.
Yes, that's Milton.
Yeah. Now, the genesis of some of these stories, can you go into that? Some of them are autobiographical. I know there's one about Iran, and 77 to 79, and I believe you taught school there.
Yes, I taught in an international school, Iran Zamin International School in Iran, and that was during that period when the revolution took place. So the first year that I was there, it was pretty peaceful, but the second year there was a lot of unrest and so on.
Now, the unrest that you witnessed, your story, by the way, is called The Fall of Iran. Now, is there some real occurrences that you built into this story, or you built the story around?
Yes. The story kind of follows an arc of a relationship that's not really working out with a woman, and at the same time that the country is undergoing this revolution. And like the story starts off, at the beginning, my girlfriend and I are we go over to my landlord's for dinner. And Iranians have this whole culture of the gracious host.
Oh, yes.
And so one of their customs is, came out when, so we had dinner, and just after dinner we're sitting down to tea, and my girlfriend says, "Oh, this tea is delicious." And my landlord's wife said, "Oh, we want you to have it." And my girlfriend said, "Oh, well, okay." And so the wife went back and got some tea from the kitchen, brought it out and gave it to her. And then we're sitting there and we have some cake, and I say, "This cake is really good." And my landlord says, "Oh, please." And he turns to his wife and has her go get the rest of the cake and bring it out and say, "Please, we want you to take this home." So then we're sitting there, and we're sitting on these beautiful Persian carpets. And they sit on these carpets and pillows, and my girlfriend says, "This carpet is really beautiful." And my landlord looks at his wife, and then he says, "Please, we want you to take it." And my girlfriend says, no, I couldn't take it." And he says, "Please, take it, we'll roll it up for you." and we both said, no, we can't take it. So once we had refused it 3 times, he was off the hook.
I see. So there's a tradition in
This
the
whole
Iranian
tradition,
culture
in
that if you say you like something,
the
host feels they have to give it to you.
Mi casa es su casa.
Right.
And the Iranian people were very friendly and gracious, and even through the revolution, for the most part, they were fine.
Right. What brought you over to Iran?
So when I got out of graduate school, I was looking for a teaching job, but there were a lot of baby boomers graduating at that time, and not too many teaching jobs in the U.S. Though a lot of us were into teaching and psychology and social work and that kind of thing. But there were jobs overseas, and I interviewed for one in Iran, and they flew me over. And there was a big American community there then.
Oh, there was.
50,000.
The Shah was still in power at that
Shah
point?
was still in power. 50,000 Americans.
Right. Now, were you a writer at that point? Had you begun writing? I think you had been to graduate school.
Yeah, I had an MFA, Master in Fine Arts in Creative Writing from University of Montana. Worked with Richard Hugo and
Richard
William
Hugo is
Kittredge.
of course, a very well-known poet. He was one of the premier poets of his time, and he's
Yes.
still highly thought of.
Right.
What was he like as a teacher?
Oh, he was a great teacher. He would, he was very dramatic, and if something was bothering him, like let's say, if someone, one of his themes was that poetry should not read like prose, that it should not be the kind of thing that one would read in the newspaper. So if a student were to do that, he would stand up, he would, exclaim about how this is not a newspaper I'm reading, you need to raise the level of the language in poetry. So he was dramatic, but he was also very positive. And
Was he an influence, one of your influences in your poetry?
yeah, definitely. His writing has a strong sense of place, and I also try to get that across in fiction too, I think, to recreate place.
Well, in your fiction, how do you start a story? Is it with a character? Is it with a scene or a theme? Writers do it differently. A controlling image sometimes? Is it a scene? What takes off? What causes a story to take off for you?
Well, in some cases do I think this would make a good story? Like the story in Iran, or the story at there's a story that's set at an orchard in New Hampshire. So in some cases it's that. And then other times I'm trying to do something. So the story that's set at the orchard, I'm trying to get across the beauty of fall in New England. So I'm sort of focusing on the writing.
Yeah. Why don't you go into that story, the genesis of that story, and a little bit about the scenario?
So that's set on an orchard. Just after I got out of graduate school, I worked on an apple orchard in New Hampshire, and through the apple season, which was really beautiful and was a hard job. It was pretty much a 7-day-a-week job, and I really liked
12 hours a day.
12 hours a day,
yeah.
yeah.
Right.
And I really liked it. I got to do all kinds of different things, like making cider, driving a tractor around, and picking up boxes of apples, and then delivering cider, and working on the machines if they broke down, and so on. But I was there with a woman,
A girlfriend.
a girlfriend, and she hated it. She was picking and boxing apples. So we had that story is kind of about that conflict where where I'm not really realizing how her attitude's changing toward.
Well,
toward the
conflict
story.
is what makes a good story, I suppose.
Absolutely, yeah. I think.
I think you need some friction there between the characters.
Right.
But also the power structure, what one person relates to the other in the sense of power. I think that comes across in some of your stories, in all of them, as a matter of fact. How each person plays the power game, whether consciously or not. Is that something that you especially wanted to delve into?
Yeah, and I think generally speaking in the stories, the main character, the guy, is a little bit in over his head. He doesn't really understand exactly what's going on, or he can't quite control. He's trying to control it, but he can't.
Is this in the guy-girl relationship or in life in general? In over his head, what do you mean?
Yeah, I think, I think that's a common experience today, that things turn out to be more complicated than we think they are. It's more, we think we can control what's going to happen, but we can't really.
Be careful what you wish for.
Well, there's that, yes.
There's
too,
that
yeah.
too, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite story in your book?
I think the one about Iran,
Yeah.
probably.
I know one reviewer actually picked out the story Kickboxing with Ingrid.
Oh, yeah.
And the very well-drawn female character, Ingrid. Was there proximity to your life with her? I mean, did you...
Well, that's another story where I'll take an event and then sort of extrapolate from the event and add to it. So I was teaching a class at UMass Boston. There was this beautiful young Swedish woman in it. And at some point I met her for a conference, and she told me this story about her own past, where she was in high school and her parents sat her down and told her that her father had another daughter, and the daughter was also at the high school, so they had to tell her about it. So anyway, this generated this idea in my mind of what would it be like if I were to have an affair with this Swedish student, and
she does relate that same story.
It's in the story, right?
In the actual.
Yeah.
That's part of the storyline.
Right, and then things just go awry. And then that's where I bring in, I had this illness called Guillain-Barré, which is
Can you describe that a little bit? I mean, people have heard of it, but maybe they've...
It's when a virus gets into your central nervous system.
Wow.
And it causes some paralysis, loss of feeling, and you lose weight.
What's the duration of...
It really varies. For me, I think it lasted about 6 weeks altogether. And eventually one recovers from it almost completely. I still have a little shaking.
Oh.
That's
How long ago was that?
a long time. 20 years ago, something like that.
Right.
So I took that and I put that into that story. That's a separate event, but...
Now, you're also a teacher. You teach. And you've taught at some prep schools in the Boston area. Are you teaching now, or?
I teach part-time still. I'm pretty much retired, but I teach creative writing at the Cambridge Adult Center in Cambridge. And I also help adults get ready for the high school equivalency exam as a volunteer.
Now, what's your connection to the Cape?
I've been coming down the Cape since the 80s. It's really where my wife and I get together.
I see.
And we bought a place in Wellfleet about 10 years ago. So I've been coming down in the summers. I play senior softball down here.
Oh, yeah. Well, Wellfleet also has some sort of literary community.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe just during the summer, mostly during the summer, but I imagine it would be quite active.
Yes. It's a great community down there. They have a terrific library and many cultural events. They have a great drama.
Is that right?
In Wellfleet, yeah.
Now, when you teach and you have some younger students, what do you try to impress upon them, or what out of your life's experience in the field of writing do you try to lend them? Of course, not all of them are going to be professional writers, but is there some gist or something that you try to get across to them about, even if it's only how to relate, how to put across their own experience on paper? That will always be a benefit. But for the ones who are more interested, like yourself when you were young, what is your direction to them, or what is your emphasis?
I think what I tried to get across to students is that writing can be both fun and useful. And if students are given both some freedom to express themselves and direction, they really seem to enjoy it. You know, I think they're often restricted in our educational system to following formats, to writing very particular types of essays, and
I see.
and writing to tests. And if they're given the chance to do creative writing, they really enjoy it.
Right. Yeah. Now, you yourself, are you in a writers group, or do you have a community of friends that you try things out on?
There's a community of writers that I meet in Somerville called the Bagel Bards.
Oh, okay.
They meet on weekends.
Yeah.
It was started by a guy named Doug Holder.
Okay.
And a number of writers come there.
Is that mostly for your poetry or is it also for the fiction?
It's for both. I think there are probably more poets in that group, but there are also fiction writers and some historical writers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Are you a big reader? What are you reading now?
Right now, I'm reading Steven Pinker's book about the Enlightenment, which is a terrific book to read because it's very positive about the condition of the world today. It's if you look at it from a distance in terms of things like safety and education and how far we've come, longevity and so on, things are much better than what comes across through the news.
Yeah, it just came out, I believe. He's very prolific, I know.
But, he is.
Yeah.
So I'm reading that. I just read Manhattan Beach by Jennifer Egan. That's fiction. It's a terrific book.
Who's been your biggest influence as far as your poetry goes, and also as far as your fiction goes?
So with poetry, it's maybe Robert Frost, Richard Hugo, Theodore Roethke. Also Emily Dickinson.
What is it in particular you like about her?
She's terrific. I think it's the density of her writing and also the philosophical side to it. People like to say that poetry should be accessible and that it's not like a little puzzle, but Emily Dickinson's poetry often is like a little puzzle. And it has a little bit of difficulty to it, but it's rewarding to read.
How about in fiction?
So in fiction, I would say Raymond Carver, Laurie Moore, Alice Munro, Flannery O'Connor.
Flannery O'Connor, yeah. Do you think of yourself in the Raymond Carver sort of school? Not, by that I mean, I think he got the tag some time ago about being a minimalist. I don't know exactly what that means.
Yeah, I'm not really a minimalist, although I think I do believe some of the, like he said, was it the fundamental aim of fiction should be accuracy of statement, something like that. And I believe that. I mean, I believe you have to get things right.
Right.
And
of course, he had a great editor, Gordon Lish.
Yes, which helped a lot, I think.
Yeah. Now, have you had that experience?
Of great editors?
Yes.
Well,
your work's been published in reviews like the Paris Review, Cream City Review, Bellevue Review, and a lot of the stories were published in a publication called Per Contra. And obviously the editor there likes your stories.
Yes. Yeah, for the most part, I think those days where editors really worked on fiction, on the fiction that writers wrote, I don't think those days are here anymore.
Maxwell Perkins, that
Yeah,
old,
I think,
the old school editor.
Publishers now really expect things to be finished.
Right, right. Does the agent help? I don't know if you have an agent or not, but
I do not have an agent.
yeah.
But yeah, in some cases, agents do fulfill that role.
Right. Do you take your scripts or your writing to a professional editor to get some help with that?
No, so it takes me a while.
Yeah, yeah.
I do think that's probably, what that does is it sort of shortcuts the process, right? Whereas it just takes me a while to see what I have to do to make a story tighter or to come up with an ending.
Right. Well, of course, short fiction, you got to cut out as much as you can, I guess.
Right.
So that, do you find it a situation where you're always trying to get in more and you don't know what to cut out? In the sense that you must streamline your stories so they have an effect. Edgar Allan Poe, I think, said things should be able to be read right away, very quickly, and they should be all focused. There's such a focus. There's nothing extraneous.
Right. He's a great writer.
Yeah. Right.
That's true. I mean, I think they should be economical.
That's a good word.
Same is true of poetry.
Now, the book is published by Tailwinds Publications. Can you describe a little bit about how you found them and what the publication process was like?
Well, I saw an advertisement calling for manuscripts. They're a fairly new publisher. So what I did was I looked up people that they had published and emailed them and talked with them.
Oh, you looked over who they had previously published?
Yeah, and talked with them, and they were all very positive. So I decided to go with them. And
was this like a first acceptance? I mean, you sent it in and they accepted it?
I sent it in and they accepted it.
Of course, all the stories had been published previously.
Yeah, most of them had been published.
Yeah.
And that, of course, that helps.
Right.
And then they did edit a little bit, the publisher, but they're very positive. They did a book launch party for me in New York.
Wow. Yeah.
And they've been great. I mean, very supportive.
Are you working on anything now that you foresee as being a novel or another book of stories, or maybe it's your poetry that you're focusing on? Yeah.
So I suppose it's both a strength and a weakness that I just work on a lot of different things, you're supposed to have a focus.
Well,
today, but
yeah.
So I'm working on another book of poems, and I'm working on a few short stories, a young adult novel.
Oh, a young adult.
Young adult novel, and I like to fool around with some kids' books too, but I haven't gotten anything published yet along those lines. But
now, is your book in the bookstore down in Wellfleet?
It's in the Wellfleet marketplace.
Yeah.
Of course, it's available online at Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
Okay. All your books. How many books of poetry have you published?
3.
Okay, so there's been 3 books.
This is the last one is
Spy Pond.
Spy Pond.
Now that's a pond in Arlington, I believe.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
But there are a number of poems set down the Cape too.
I see. Okay. And what advice would you give for a young writer, or somebody just not necessarily young, but somebody starting out? I mean, people occasionally don't get started till they're in their 40s or 50s.
That's true.
Or even after they're retired. I know the struggle to get published is something that can be quite daunting. Through your experience, is there any sort of message you can give, or any sort of perseverance, or patience, or whatever it might be?
Well, to start with, I would have to say that you'd better like writing for its own sake. You'd better enjoy the process and enjoy what you write.
You're not going to get rich at it.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah.
Writing, like every other field, is also heavily tied into networking.
Oh.
And, so that's the advantage of going to MFA programs, that you make connections. And it's good to have community connections as well.
Do you still communicate with some people you went to graduate school where you obtained the MFA?
A couple, yes.
And did some of that networking at graduate school help you get started?
Yeah, though the Richard Hugo, just before I left, said that he would be happy to help me get a book published with his publisher. But then, not too long after that, he died.
He passed away.
He passed
after that.
away. Yeah. So that one didn't quite work out, but that's the way that can work.
Yeah, I see. Have you been back to Montana at all?
No, I'm going to go there this summer, though.
Yeah. There's a lot of writers who hang out there too. Richard
Yes.
Ford, Tom McWayne.
Yeah, some good writers.
Yeah. Well, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. I wish you good luck with the book and the books to come.
Well, thank you very much.
We enjoyed talking with you, and thanks for being a guest.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.